Hi, everyone. It's Mrs. Linderman. We're going to continue today reading about natural disasters and how they affect people. And in today's lesson, we're going to read about another type of disaster. It's called a drought. We're going to focus a little bit on how and why droughts occur. And then for your focus today with your Google Classroom activity, you're going to be thinking about cause and effect. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that after we finish this part of the story. All right. So today we're going to talk about, like I said, drought. My camera is going to focus in just a second there. It's so nice and sunny today where I am, and so I hate to close the blind. This says El Nino brings drought, and you'll notice here is a map, so that's a great text feature. There's a photograph at the bottom, and it's got a caption here, so we'll take a look at those in just a second. El Nino brings drought. The people of Central America know that El Nino is a force to be reckoned with. El Nino is a pattern of winds and ocean currents that affects Earth's weather. In different parts of the world at the same time, it can trigger storms, floods, or drought, which is an unusually long period of extremely dry weather. In 1997 and 1998, El Nino produced a terrible drought in much of Central America. Crops and farm animals died, and forest fires raged across the parched land. Food and water shortages affected almost 1 million people. So here is where Central America is located. North America is at the top, right to the north, which is Mexico and the United States. And then South America is down here at the bottom. So it connects those two places. And it's got countries like Honduras and Costa Rica, Panama. You'll see those on there. So this is where Central America is located. Look at the picture here. It says this Guatemalan farmer's crops were destroyed by El Nino-related drought. And remember, a drought is an unusually long period of extremely dry weather. So you can see, right, without any water, these crops are not going to survive. This is in Guatemala. That's located right here. An unstable environment. I want you to pay attention to all this information and then looking at the photos and the captions. The countries of Central America contain a diverse range of plants and animals. Diverse meaning there's a lot of different types. The region is home to tropical rainforests, swamps, beaches, and mountains. It is an important agricultural area, and many of its residents make a living producing coffee, sugar, and maize. Unfortunately, the rich and varied environment of the region has suffered over the years. It lies in an unstable part of Earth and is prone to earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. It has also been hit by many hurricanes. Human activities have threatened Central America's environment too. Rainforests have been cut down, destroying the habitats of many animals and weakening the ability of the soil to support plants and trees. We've talked about how we need those plants and the roots right in the ground. They hold things together, and when there are no plants there, then things can just wash away. We call that erosion. The picture at the top. In October 1998, soon after the drought ended, Hurricane Mitch brought floods to Honduras and Nicaragua. At the bottom, it says in Costa Rica, rainforest is being cut down or burnt to clear land for farming. So getting rid of all of this lush, beautiful plants so that they can farm the land. El Nino probably has the greatest effect on Central America's ecosystem. The region needs to receive a certain quantity of water each month to maintain its crops and water supply to its people. During El Nino, which occurs about every 2 to 7 years, Central America receives little or no rain at all for several months. Other regions are also affected by El Nino. The Philippines, Australia, and Indonesia experienced drought during the 1997 to 1998 El Nino. At the same time, Floods occurred in Peru and Ecuador, 2 countries in South America. So remember, El Nino, what that is, right? It's a pattern of winds and ocean currents, and it affects weather. Here, the El Nino of 1997 and 1998 brought heavy rain to Peru. You can see how deep that water is. That man is almost up to his waist in the water. And here is a great graphic with some pictures of what the currents in the water are doing and their temperatures. So let's read this one. This is normal conditions. So most of the time, westerly winds produce ocean currents that carry cool surface waters away from South America toward Australia. This effect brings heavy rainfall to Southeast Asia while cold ocean water rises up along the coast of South America. So the winds are coming out of the west, blowing toward the west. But during El Nino, here's what happens. The westerly winds die down and change direction. Surface currents are reversed. They now carry warm ocean water in an easterly direction across the Pacific Ocean. This change has a dramatic effect on rainfall patterns worldwide. So El Nino affects the whole world, and the United States as well. So you can see it's going in the westerly direction, and then it does an about face, and it starts to go in the other direction, and that creates a lot of change. An unexpected El Nino. In May 1997, the waters in the Pacific Ocean had already warmed up by 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit in places. Also, storm systems normally found over Indonesia were moving east. Both of these changes were significant clues for meteorologists. A new El Nino was beginning. In most cases, meteorologists are able to predict El Nino up to a year in advance. However, the scientists didn't realize the 1997 El Nino was underway until 6 months before the warm water arrived off the coast of South America. David Parker, an El Nino tracker at England's Meteorological Office, predicted that the 1997 El Nino would have devastating effects. He was correct. This is what he said. So here are some quotation marks, right? So we know someone's speaking. The consequences of El Nino will probably be felt worldwide over the coming year. So far, 1997 is already the second warmest year ever, so we could see a new record. And here's a picture of a meteorologist, and it says that they studied data about Earth's atmosphere to learn about the weather. Down here in this blue fact box, studying El Nino. This satellite photograph shows the warm El Nino current in the Pacific in June 1997. Meteorologists use images like this to help them understand El Nino. Although they know when an El Nino weather pattern is starting to happen, they still do not know why the ocean currents change direction. So this is a photograph right from space, and it's showing Central America, and it's identifying this warm El Nino current. I love that they have these labels, because if those weren't there, I wouldn't know what that was a picture of. Right here is Australia, and here is the Pacific Ocean. So using all of these text features help us to understand what's happening. Devastation. For many months at the end of 1997 and the beginning of 1998, much of Central America was devastated by drought. Crops withered under the hot, dry conditions, and the intense heat caused roads to buckle. Rivers and lakes dried up, and the water levels in reservoirs steadily dropped. Some people died from starvation during the drought, and many died from the heat. Both rural and urban areas were affected. Rural means the country, and urban is like the city. Farmers watched their crops fail, and together with the city dwellers, they suffered food and water shortages. So here's a picture of a in Honduras says he surveys his withered maize crop. Okay, so maize looks very similar to corn. And then in this fact box, it talks about what is a drought. A drought is an extended shortage of rainfall that is unusual for an area. It is considered to be a temporary condition, even though it can last for months or even years. Regions that have very low yearly rainfall are considered to be arid or dry. The dry weather shriveled trees and other plants, creating conditions perfect for wildfires. As forests burned, animal habitats were destroyed. Many people who worked gathering and selling forest products lost their jobs. Smoke from fires made breathing difficult for people and animals. For months, the skies were polluted by a gray haze of smoke that caused health problems and poor visibility. Right, so it's so dry, things catch on fire much easier. Right, coping with a disaster. Here's that heading. Most countries in Central America were not prepared for the devastating effects of the drought. As harvests failed, people began to starve. Some countries were helped by international aid agencies. Emergency food supplies were shipped to the worst areas. The longer the drought continued, however, the more severe the disaster became. Other countries, such as Costa Rica, did not request international help. Costa Rica's government limited the effects of the disaster by acting immediately at the beginning of the drought. First, it declared a state of emergency, which gave the government more power to control resources such as water and transportation. The government rationed water, limiting the amount that people could use so that no water was wasted. They built wells around the country to gain access to more underground water. The government also organized a national fire prevention campaign. Throughout the crisis, the government kept Costa Ricans informed about El Nino and its effects. So they were able to do some things to help out. Here's a photograph that says in Guatemala and other countries in Central America, emergency food supplies were handed out. So they've got big bags of food that they're giving people. In some countries in Central America, including Costa Rica, cattle were herded away from the driest areas. So they're trying to save those animals. Central America today. Costa Rica's programs worked. By May 1998, the country had survived the crisis. They had created a plan to ensure that people would have food and water throughout the drought and to limit damage to livestock and crops. They would know what to do when El Nino and drought returned. In recent years, drought has returned to Central America frequently, and each time, emergency aid programs have been put in place. However, in a region that is constantly battered by hurricanes, floods, earthquakes, and drought, long-term planning is needed to help the people and their land survive. Costa Rica's handling of the 1997-1998 drought serves as a model to other countries in Central America facing natural disaster. So they've learned, right, what to do from that country's government. Here's a beautiful picture that says the beaches of Costa Rica attract tourism, bringing much needed money into the country. So today, you're going to focus on cause and effect when you are doing your activity for today. Let me show you what I mean by that. Cause and effect. I like to think of it as when something happens, then something else happens as a result. So for example, in the story, we learned that they clear land for farming, right? So when they do that, then rainforests are cut down or they're burned, right? So when this happens, then this happens. How about when that rainforest is cut down, then habitats are destroyed, right? We learned that the soil is weakened and can't support plants and different trees. And when the soil is weak and can't support those plants and trees, what can happen? When this happens, then this can happen. People, remember, lost their jobs. They weren't able to harvest the coffee and the maize and the sugar. Right? Floods and hurricanes came through and they washed away that unstable land because the plants weren't there to hold everything in place. So I always like to think of cause and effect. And there are two ways to spell effect. It can be with an E or with an A, and they have very different meanings. So we're talking about effect. When this happens, then this happens. All right. So today, when you're thinking about cause and effect in your activities, you're going to be identifying the parts of sentences that are the cause, and then what's the effect. So be thinking of that phrase, when, then.